A bet only feels harmless when you're not the one being wagered. Naomi Brooks heard the laughter before she saw who had caused it. It rolled across the Belladonna's private dining room, past crystal glasses and white roses, toward the service alcove where she stood holding a silver coffee pot. At the center of the table sat Vincent Moretti, motionless beneath the amber chandelier, his tailored black suit absorbing the light. His guests laughed louder than he did. In fact, he did not laugh at all. "Come on, Vincent," one of the men said, sliding $100 bill beneath his wineglass. "One dinner with her. Prove you can charm anyone." Every face turned toward Naomi. Her uniform suddenly felt too tight at the collar. She had spent 4 years working in Vincent's estate without breaking a glass, repeating gossip, or asking why certain visitors arrived after midnight. Reliability had made her nearly invisible. Tonight, invisibility was being taken from her. Vincent studied her with the cool attention he usually reserved for contracts. He could end the joke with one sentence. Instead, pride made the decision for him. "Naomi," he said, "have dinner with me tomorrow night." A guest covered a grin with his hand. Another placed 2 more bills on the table. Naomi set down the coffee pot before its faint trembling could betray her. She understood the trap immediately. Refusing the most powerful man in the room could cost her job. Accepting would turn her dignity into entertainment. Vincent expected embarrassment, perhaps obedience. What he did not expect was negotiation. Naomi stepped out of the alcove and met his eyes. "Is that an invitation, Mr. Moretti, or an order?" The laughter stopped as sharply as music cut from a speaker. Vincent's expression remained controlled, but something behind it shifted. No employee had ever asked him to name the difference. "An invitation," he answered. "Then I'll accept under 3 conditions." One guest scoffed. Vincent raised one finger, and the interruption died. Naomi continued. "The dinner happens in the main room, not behind closed doors. I wear my own clothes, and my employment will not depend on whether I impress you." Each condition removed a piece of the power they had tried to use against her. Yet Naomi knew the price. By speaking plainly, she had risked the paycheck that covered her mother's prescriptions and the small apartment they shared in Queens. Still, her gaze never dropped. Vincent looked at the money beneath the glasses, then at the guests waiting for him to put her back in her place. Instead, he lowered his untouched drink. "Agreed," he said. Naomi nodded once. "Then tomorrow at 7. She lifted the coffee pot and resumed serving, but the room had changed. The men no longer saw a maid cornered by a joke. Vincent no longer saw an employee whose answer he could predict. And as Naomi poured the final cup without spilling a drop, one quiet question settled over the table. When she arrived as his equal, which of them would truly be on trial? Rain polished the Manhattan sidewalks until every streetlight looked like a blade of gold beneath the tires. At exactly 7, a black sedan stopped outside Naomi Brooks's apartment building in Queens, but the driver carried no flowers, no message, and no instruction beyond the restaurant address. Naomi noticed. Vincent Moretti had honored her first condition. No one would collect her from her home. 10 minutes later, her own cab pulled away from the curb, paid for with money she had set aside after filling her mother's prescription organizer for the week. She wore a midnight blue dress she had owned for 6 years, simple pearl earrings, and the steady expression of a woman determined not to become anyone's entertainment. Across the river, Vincent waited beneath the amber lights of Belladonna, a private Italian restaurant where judges, financiers, and men with carefully guarded names dined behind smoked glass. He had reserved the entire back room out of habit. Then, remembering her second condition, he released it and chose a table in the main dining room. That small surrender irritated him more than it should have. Privacy was power in Vincent's world. Tonight, Naomi had made visibility her shield. When she entered, conversation softened around her. The maitre d' looked past her toward the door, searching for the person she must have accompanied. "Reservation?" he asked. "Moretti," Naomi replied. His smile tightened. "The service entrance is around the corner." Vincent heard every word from 20 feet away. For one cold second, pride urged him to remain seated and see how she handled it. Naomi had already proven she could defend herself. But that thought carried the same cowardice as the wager, allowing someone else to bear humiliation while he observed from safety. Vincent rose. The scrape of his chair crossed the room. "Miss Brooks is my guest." The maitre d' turned pale. "Mr. Moretti, I misunderstood. No, Vincent said, approaching them. You assumed. Naomi's eyes met his. There was no gratitude in them, and he realized she had not needed rescue. What mattered was whether he would accept responsibility for the world his name controlled. Our table is ready, he told her, then faced the maitre d' again. And her cab fare will be added to my bill. She came independently because I gave my word that she would. By speaking loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear, Vincent sacrificed something he had guarded for years, the appearance that no one could set terms for him. Naomi removed her coat and handed it to the attendant. Thank you for correcting him, she said. Do not mistake that for passing the test. Vincent almost smiled. Almost. At the table, no champagne waited. No photographers hid near the bar. No guests from the previous night occupied neighboring seats. He had obeyed every condition precisely. Yet the silence between them remained edged with suspicion. You expected another trick, he said. I expected you to decide whether your promise mattered when no one from your dining room was watching. And you are still deciding. A server placed menus between them. Vincent did not open his. Instead, he removed his phone, set it face down, and made a decision that would travel beyond the restaurant. He called the estate manager. The men who attended last night are no longer welcome at my home until they apologize directly to Miss Brooks. Return the wagered money. Every dollar. Naomi's fingers stilled against the menu. The bet had been an insult, but publicly rejecting the men behind it could cost Vincent alliances built over decades. Reputation had protected his authority. Now he was spending it. There, he said after ending the call. The joke is finished. Naomi studied him beneath the warm brass light. The money was never the worst part. Vincent's expression hardened, not with anger, but recognition. What was? That you needed me to challenge you before you remembered I could say no. Around them, silverware touched porcelain. A piano murmured near the bar. Vincent, a man accustomed to answering threats and settling debts, found no defense that did not sound smaller than the truth. He finally opened the menu, but his attention remained on the woman across from him. The wager had been canceled. The conditions had been honored. Yet one question now stood between them, sharper than anything Naomi had asked the night before. Could a powerful man learn respect only after being corrected, or would he choose it when it cost him something no one could force him to surrender? The candle between them burned lower as the waiter returned with 2 porcelain plates, setting Naomi's roasted chicken before her and Vincent's untouched steak beneath the amber light. For several moments, only the piano spoke. Naomi lifted her fork, but Vincent closed his menu and looked toward the dining room entrance. His security chief stood there, waiting for the smallest signal. Tell the car to leave, Vincent said. The man hesitated. Sir, Miss Brooks arranged her own transportation home. There will be no escort unless she requests one. The order was quiet, yet it carried across the polished floor. For Vincent, protection had always meant control with a better name. Releasing it felt strangely like stepping into a room without a weapon. The security chief nodded and disappeared. Naomi noticed, though she offered no gratitude for receiving what had already been promised. You could have done that before I arrived, she said. Yes. Vincent cut into his steak. I did not. The admission landed without decoration. His phone vibrated against the white tablecloth. A message glowed across the screen from one of the men who had attended the wager. A photograph of Naomi entering the restaurant, followed by a cruel remark about servants forgetting their place. Vincent's thumb hovered over the reply field. One command could frighten the sender into silence. One lie could preserve his pride. Instead, he placed the phone face up between them. Naomi read the message, and something in her expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. She had seen contempt dressed as humor too many times to mistake it. This is what canceled means to your friends? She asked. Apparently not. Then canceling the money was easy. Her eyes remained steady. What will you do when respect costs you their approval? Vincent's jaw tightened. The men in that circle had shared his tables, guarded his secrets, and built their loyalty around the certainty that he would never admit fault before anyone. Publicly correcting them would not cost cash. It would cost standing. Naomi returned to her meal, refusing to rescue him from the choice. For the first time that evening, the decision belonged entirely to Vincent. He opened the group thread and typed slowly. The wager was degrading. I allowed it because my pride mattered more to me than Miss Brooks's dignity. That ends tonight. Anyone who speaks about her, or any employee in my home, as property will no longer be welcome there. His fingers stopped above the screen. Sending the message would turn a private correction into a public confession. Naomi did not look at the phone. She looked at him. Vincent pressed send. Replies appeared almost immediately. A question mark. A laughing face. Then silence from men who had never expected their leader to place principle above their amusement. Vincent switched off the phone and set it aside. No threat followed. No punishment. Only a boundary that included himself. You did not have to show me that, Naomi said. I did not do it to impress you. Why then? Across the restaurant, glassware shimmered beneath the chandeliers. Vincent studied his reflection in the dark window and found that power looked different when it was not being used to win. Because you were right, he said. And because tomorrow, when you return to work, I will remember that being your employer does not make me the owner of your choices. Naomi's shoulders eased, barely an inch, but the movement carried more weight than applause. One question had been answered. Vincent could choose respect when no one forced him. Yet the answer created another problem. Your guests will blame me, she said. They will say I changed you. Did you? Naomi considered him over the rim of her water glass. No, I only made it harder for you to hide from yourself. The words left him still. Dinner ended without romance, promises, or forgiveness. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. At the curb, Vincent did not reach for her coat, summon his driver, or decide how she would leave. Naomi opened the rideshare application on her own phone. Before the car arrived, his screen lit again. This time, the message came from his estate manager. 3 longtime guests had withdrawn from the charity dinner scheduled for Saturday, and 2 senior associates wanted an urgent meeting about Vincent's public confession. He read it once, then slipped the phone into his pocket. Naomi saw enough to understand. Respect has sent you a bill, she said. A black sedan pulled to the curb, its tires whispering over wet pavement. Vincent opened the rear door only after she gave a small nod. It has, he answered. Naomi entered the car carrying nothing he had purchased and owing him nothing he could collect. As the sedan disappeared into the silver haze, Vincent remained beneath the restaurant awning, alone with a truth more dangerous to his pride than any challenge from an enemy. Honoring one woman's dignity had been simple and private. Now he would have to defend that choice before the men whose loyalty depended on him never changing. By midnight, the rain had thinned to a cold mist around the Moretti estate, leaving the stone courtyard silver beneath the security lights. Inside the library, 2 senior associates waited beside a mahogany table, their untouched drinks reflecting the fire. Vincent entered without removing his coat. Neither man offered a greeting. Your message made us look weak, one of them said. The other placed a printed copy of Vincent's confession on the table as though it were evidence. They did not care that Naomi Brooks had been humiliated. They cared that Vincent had admitted fault where outsiders could see it. In their world, authority survived by appearing incapable of shame. Delete the message, the first associate said. Restore the invitations. Tell everyone the woman misunderstood a private joke. Vincent looked down at the page. Hours earlier, Naomi had asked whether respect could survive the loss of approval. Now the answer had arrived wearing tailored suits and familiar faces. These men had stood beside him for years. They had protected his reputation, strengthened his influence, and mistaken his silence for agreement. Vincent folded the paper once, carefully. Her name is Naomi Brooks, he said. The fire snapped behind him. One associate leaned forward. This is not about her. That is precisely the problem. The words landed softly, but neither man moved. Vincent told them the confession would remain. The ban on guests who degraded his employees would remain as well. Any associate unwilling to accept that boundary could withdraw from Saturday's charity dinner and from every future gathering at the estate. No threat sharpened his voice. No display of force followed. He simply gave them the freedom to leave, knowing they might take years of loyalty and influence with them. The older associate removed his invitation from his pocket and set it beside the confession. The second man followed. 2 white cards rested on the dark wood, quiet as closed doors. You are sacrificing trust for a maid, one said. Vincent's eyes settled on the invitations. No, I am discovering what your trust required. The room went silent. By morning, the cost had moved beyond canceled dinner seats. 3 donors suspended their commitments to the charity event. A longtime business contact declined Vincent's call. The estate manager stood in the breakfast room beneath pale winter light, reading each withdrawal from a tablet while coffee cooled between them. The missing donations could be replaced. The fractured alliances could not. Should I issue a statement? The manager asked. Not about me. Vincent turned toward the windows, where workers were raising the charity pavilion across the lawn. Send a written policy to every employee and guest. No one working in this house will be used for entertainment, wagers, or personal dares. Complaints will go to an independent employment attorney, not through my office. The manager hesitated. That final condition removed Vincent's ability to control what reached the outside world. It made accountability permanent rather than ceremonial. Effective immediately? Effective before Naomi returns. Across Queens, Naomi stood beneath the fluorescent lights of a neighborhood pharmacy, counting out the money for her mother's medication. Her phone displayed a copy of the new policy forwarded by another estate employee. She read it twice. Vincent had not called her. He had not asked for forgiveness, gratitude, or another dinner. More importantly, he had created protection that did not depend on his mood. Naomi placed the phone face down beside the pharmacy receipt. Relief came, but it did not erase caution. A man could write rules in one morning. Living beneath them when they limited his own power would take longer. Back at the estate, the security chief entered the breakfast room carrying Naomi's work schedule. Her shift begins at 9, he said. Vincent glanced at the clock. 8:47. Outside, a city bus stopped beyond the iron gates. Naomi stepped down in her plain dark coat, refusing the estate car exactly as she had promised herself. The security chief waited for instructions. Vincent gave none. For the first time, Naomi was not returning to a house where her dignity depended solely on the character of its owner. She was returning to test whether his decision had changed the house itself. The iron gates rolled shut behind the city bus with a low mechanical hum. From the security station, Vincent Moretti's security chief reported Naomi Brooks's arrival, then waited with his hands behind his back. Do not escort her, Vincent said. If she needs something, let her ask. At 9 o'clock, Naomi entered through the staff door in her plain dark coat. The usual smell of lemon polish lingered in the corridor, but something else had changed. A cream-colored envelope had been placed beside the time clock. Inside were the new employee protections, the name of an independent employment attorney, and a statement declaring that no complaint required management approval. Several employees read in silence. Others glanced toward the cameras as if the walls might still punish curiosity. Naomi folded her copy and placed it in her pocket. Paper was not proof. Not yet. 20 minutes later, the estate manager found her arranging silverware in the breakfast room. His voice remained formal, but uncertainty had replaced its old authority. Mr. Moretti wants the West dining room prepared for tonight. Naomi looked at the assignment sheet. Her name had been added after the schedule was posted. Until yesterday, refusing such a change could have cost her hours, recommendations, or employment. Now the first boundary stood directly in front of her. I cannot stay beyond 4, she said. My original schedule ends then. The manager's fingers tightened around the clipboard. The guests arrive at 6. Then another employee will need to prepare the room. No anger sharpened her words. That made them harder to dismiss. The manager glanced toward the doorway, expecting Vincent to appear and settle the matter. No one came. Across the hall, the security chief had heard every word. He remained still. Naomi removed the attorney's card from her pocket, not as a threat, but as a reminder that the decision no longer belonged solely to the men in that house. Please record the schedule change and my refusal, she said. The manager could comply and surrender a measure of control, or resist, and become the first person tested by the policy he had been ordered to distribute. He lowered the clipboard. Your original shift stands. The sentence was quiet. Its consequence was not. Naomi had risked paid hours she could not easily replace, but the house had yielded without Vincent rescuing her. At 11, the estate manager entered Vincent's study carrying the documented exchange. Sunlight lay across the mahogany desk, illuminating the names of donors who had withdrawn overnight. She refused the added assignment, he said. And you accepted that? The policy required it. Vincent read the report once. The old instinct rose swiftly. Ask why the dinner had not been anticipated, identify who had failed, restore order through command. Instead, he signed beneath the manager's notation. Then the policy worked. By early afternoon, Naomi encountered the harder test. A housekeeper approached her near the laundry room, holding her own envelope against her chest. Her daughter had a medical appointment the following week, but she feared requesting time away after previous warnings about reliability. Naomi could have spoken for her. She could have turned one successful refusal into influence. Instead, she handed the woman the attorney's card. "Use your own voice," Naomi said. "The protection means more if it belongs to you." Minutes later, the request was submitted directly, without Naomi's name attached. The change was beginning to move beyond her. At 4 o'clock, Naomi clocked out. No one reduced her hours. No one blocked the staff exit. Beyond the windows, Vincent stood beside the unprepared west dining room while the estate manager reassigned the evening work. Naomi crossed the drive toward the bus stop without looking back. She had returned to discover whether respect could survive outside a private conversation. It had survived one refusal. Now a more dangerous question remained. What would happen when every employee in Vincent Moretti's house realized the new boundary belonged to them too? By 9 the next morning, the brass tray beside the estate manager's office held 7 written requests. One asked for a child's medical appointment. Another requested Sunday mornings for church. 2 employees corrected schedules they had once been too afraid to question. The housekeeper Naomi had guided requested 3 days away to care for her father after surgery. None of the papers carried Naomi Brooks's name. That mattered. The estate manager reviewed each request beneath the pale light of his desk lamp, then adjusted the weekly roster according to the policy. By noon, the cost appeared in black ink. A formal charity luncheon was 48 hours away, and the estate no longer had enough available staff to prepare it by Vincent Moretti's exacting standards. The manager carried the revised schedule into Vincent's study. Vincent stood before the windows, one hand resting against the cold marble mantel. His security chief remained near the door, silent and watchful. "Every request is protected," the manager said. "Every request is valid. But if I approve them all, the luncheon cannot be serviced as planned." The old answer came easily to Vincent. Deny 2 requests. Offer overtime to people who understood that his invitations were not suggestions. Make the house obey. For years, control had arrived so quickly that he had mistaken it for leadership. Then reduce the luncheon, Vincent said. The manager blinked. "Sir, close the east dining room. Cut the guest list. Inform the foundation that service will be limited." The luncheon was not merely social. Its polished tables connected Vincent to judges, donors, and business leaders who preferred influence wrapped in crystal and linen. Reducing it would expose a weakness his rivals could measure. Yet forcing employees to surrender newly protected time would expose something worse. "There will be complaints," the security chief said. Vincent's eyes remained on the rain streaking the glass. "Let them complain to me." Hours later, Naomi entered the staff corridor and found the atmosphere changed. The request board was full. Names once whispered behind pantry doors now stood openly beside approved dates. No one had been dismissed. No one had lost a shift as punishment. At the bottom, however, the revised luncheon notice carried an unmistakable consequence: reduced attendance, simplified service, east dining room closed. The housekeeper approached Naomi with her approval form held carefully between both hands. Relief softened her face, but guilt remained beneath it. "They changed the luncheon because of us." "Because the old schedule depended on people being afraid to say no," Naomi replied. "That is not the same thing." Across the corridor, another employee hesitated beside the request box. This time Naomi did not offer instructions. The housekeeper stepped forward instead. "Write what you need," she told him. "The rule applies to you too." Naomi watched the words pass from one employee to another without her carrying them. The protection had stopped being a favor attached to Vincent's conscience. It had become a practice the staff could defend themselves. On the afternoon of the luncheon, expensive cars curved through the wet drive, but several were turned away after their owners discovered their invitations had been withdrawn. Inside, fewer tables stood beneath the chandeliers. The silver was flawless, the service calm, and the approved employees remained with their families, their doctors, and their obligations beyond the estate. A donor confronted Vincent near the library doors. "You reduced this event because your staff wanted days off." Vincent did not look toward Naomi, though she stood within earshot carrying a coffee service. He offered no explanation about her courage, no story designed to make his decision seem noble. I reduced it because their time is not mine to take, he said. The donor left before dessert, taking a promised contribution with him. Vincent allowed the door to close. Naomi set the silver pot on the sideboard, her expression steady. This was no longer a test that cost him only convenience, pride, or disapproving friends. Employee dignity had begun to limit his access, his prestige, and the machinery of influence built inside his home. Yet as the chandeliers dimmed over half the usual number of guests, another pressure gathered beyond the estate walls. Vincent had proven that the boundary could survive when his employees used it together. He had not yet proven it could survive when the men who depended on his control decided that respect had become a threat. 3 black envelopes slid beneath the estate's iron gate before sunrise, their paper dry despite the mist silvering the stone driveway. Each bore Vincent Moretti's name. None carried a return address. By 8, his security chief had placed them across the walnut desk in the library, where pale morning light cut through the blinds in narrow bars. The first contained notices from suppliers who would no longer extend credit. The second confirmed that a private club had suspended Vincent's membership. The third held a single typed sentence: "Restore order inside your house, or conduct your affairs without us." Vincent read it twice, his face revealing nothing. "They are not angry about the luncheon," the security chief said. "They are afraid the policy will spread." Across the estate, Naomi Brooks heard the consequences in smaller sounds. A delivery truck rolled away without unloading groceries. 2 telephones rang unanswered in the manager's office. Near the laundry room, a housekeeper stared at her approved leave form, while another employee quietly admitted that his father had been scheduled for surgery. "Submit yours," the housekeeper told him. "The policy belongs to you, too." Naomi stopped beside the doorway. No one asked her to intervene. No one needed her permission. The dignity once defended by a single question at a dinner table had become something employees could extend to one another. Then the front doors opened. Vincent's security chief entered the service corridor with 2 members of his team, not to threaten anyone, but to deliver an instruction that changed the air. Until further notice, employees were to remain inside while transportation was arranged. Several workers exchanged uneasy glances. Protection could become confinement when powerful men decided fear justified control. Naomi stepped forward. "Are we in danger?" "No direct threat has been made against any employee," the security chief answered. "Then you cannot keep us here." His jaw tightened. He had spent years preventing risk before it acquired a name. "Mr. Moretti authorized precautions." Naomi looked toward the library, then back at him. "The policy protects our time and our right to leave. If precautions erase those rights, the policy disappears the moment it becomes inconvenient." For the first time, the pressure did not wait for Vincent to choose. Naomi walked into the library carrying no tray, no document, and no request for rescue. She placed the facts before him plainly. His associates had challenged his authority, and his security response had passed that challenge down to innocent employees. "You cannot protect our dignity by taking our freedom," she said. The room went still. Vincent turned toward his security chief. Every instinct that had kept him powerful demanded locked gates, controlled movement, and unquestioned obedience. Yet Naomi had shown him the hidden cost of that instinct. "Open the gate," Vincent said. "Offer transportation. Do not require it." The security chief hesitated only long enough to understand what the order meant. Vincent was accepting a kind of vulnerability his world considered unforgivable. Employees would remain free to leave, and the men outside would see that fear could no longer make his household obedient. The iron gate opened before noon. Naomi left on the city bus beside 2 co-workers, carrying her own bag and choosing her own route. No escort followed. No retaliation waited at the time clock. Behind her, Vincent's business lines continued to go silent. Credit, access, and influence had already been stripped away. Now he had surrendered something deeper, the certainty that every person beneath his roof could be controlled for the sake of his survival. At the next stop, Naomi watched the housekeeper help her co-worker complete his request for leave. She said nothing. Her eyes remained steady. Back at the estate, the security chief stood beside Vincent as another message appeared on the library telephone. This one offered no compromise. The men Vincent had refused were no longer asking him to restore the old order. They wanted him removed from it. Vincent set the telephone face down. The boundary had survived pressure from outside. The question now was whether Naomi's freedom could survive becoming the reason his own empire turned against him. By 9 o'clock, the brass pendulum in Vincent Moretti's library had become the loudest thing in the estate. Each swing crossed another minute without a call from the men who once answered before the first ring ended. Vincent stood beside his desk while the security chief placed a sealed folder on the dark mahogany. No threat waited inside. Something colder did. Resignation letters. Account closures. Notices from attorneys withdrawing representation. At the bottom lay a petition signed by senior figures from Vincent's own organization, demanding that he transfer authority before midnight or watch every remaining business connection disappear with him. They had mistaken his silence for hesitation. Vincent read the signatures twice. These were not enemies outside his gates. These were men whose loyalty had depended upon his control of everyone beneath him. "Tell them I accept," he said. The security chief's jaw tightened. "Accept their terms?" "Their resignations." Vincent opened the wall safe and removed the documents that gave him final authority over the businesses still carrying his name. For years, those pages had made rooms fall silent. Now they felt like polished chains. He called the estate manager into the library, then instructed the independent employment attorney to join by telephone. Before either could question him, Vincent signed an irrevocable transfer removing the estate staff from every company controlled by his criminal associates. Their employment would move into a separate legal trust with protected wages, health insurance, and severance funds. The trust would be governed by the attorney and an elected employee committee. Vincent would finance it, but he would not control it. The pen stopped above the final signature line. Losing influence had wounded his empire. Signing would surrender ownership of the one structure through which he could still decide what happened to the people working under his roof. The security chief lowered his voice. "Once this is filed, you cannot take it back. They could leave tomorrow, and you would still owe every dollar." Vincent looked toward the rain-dark windows. That is what freedom costs when the man offering it has spent years making obedience profitable. The signature landed. Ink crossed paper. The balance of power changed before the clock struck 10. Naomi learned about the transfer the next morning when the estate manager gathered the employees near the time clock. No armed guards surrounded them. No polished speech from Vincent softened the announcement. The attorney explained the trust in plain language, then distributed ballots for employee representatives. Naomi read every page. The protection was real. More importantly, it did not require gratitude. When the housekeeper nominated Naomi for the committee, several workers immediately agreed. Naomi shook her head. "You already found your voice," she said gently. "Choose who will listen to all of you, not who first reminded you to speak." The housekeeper considered that, then nominated herself. Her hand trembled, but it remained raised. Around the room, other hands followed. From the corridor, Vincent watched without entering. For once, his presence was unnecessary. By noon, the transfer became public. His remaining associates answered exactly as expected. They removed him from every shared company, canceled his access to their accounts, and declared that the Moretti name no longer carried authority within their circle. The empire Vincent had inherited did not collapse with sirens or shattered glass. It vanished through signatures, passwords, and doors that no longer opened. Yet the estate continued breathing. Employees finished their scheduled work. Approved leave remained approved. The gates stayed open. At 4 o'clock, Naomi found Vincent alone beside the front steps, holding the final notice that stripped him of command. "You gave away control before they could use us to take it from you," she said. Vincent folded the paper once. "No, I stopped calling control protection." Naomi's eyes remained steady. "Then do not expect this to make you a good man." "I do not." His answer came without defense. "But it may keep me from asking other people to pay for the man I was." Naomi walked toward the public bus stop, not as an employee escaping a powerful employer, but as a woman whose freedom no longer depended upon his mood. Behind her, Vincent remained beneath the stone archway of an estate he still owned, but could no longer rule as before. Then the attorney called. The trust documents were secure, but the former associates had discovered the dinner wager that began everything. By morning, they intended to release Naomi's name, photograph, and private family information to the press, turning her dignity into the weapon that would finish Vincent's fall. The empire was gone. What remained was a choice no contract could make for either of them. Blue light from a television then swept across the estate gates before dawn, turning the iron bars into moving shadows. Beyond them, reporters gathered with cameras, waiting to turn a private woman into public evidence against a fallen man. Naomi Brooks arrived by bus, carrying a plain folder beneath her coat. Vincent's security chief met her at the entrance and quietly offered a car, a guarded apartment, and a route through the service gate. Naomi declined all three. "If I disappear because powerful men printed my name," she said, "then they still get to decide where I am allowed to stand." Inside the library, Vincent waited beside a statement prepared by his attorney. It denied the wager, described Naomi as a valued employee, and threatened legal action against anyone who published her mother's address. One signature would have released it. Naomi read the page once, then placed it face down. "You cannot protect my dignity by rewriting what happened." Vincent's jaw tightened, but he did not reach for the paper. The old Vincent would have controlled the truth before breakfast. The man standing before her understood that control was exactly what had brought them here. Naomi opened her folder. Inside was a statement in her own words. It confirmed the wager, the humiliating invitation, and the conditions she had demanded before accepting dinner. It also named what followed: the public apology, the employee protections, the independent trust, and the empire Vincent had surrendered rather than reclaim authority over his workers. She neither praised nor absolved him. "They expect me to hide," Naomi said, "or defend you." Her eyes remained steady. "I will do neither. I will speak for myself." At 8 o'clock, the estate manager opened the front doors. Naomi crossed the stone steps alone while Vincent remained inside, beyond the reach of the microphones. Camera shutters cracked through the cold morning. Questions collided around her mother, her employment, and the dinner wager. Naomi waited until the noise exhausted itself. Then she told the truth without ornament. "What Vincent Moretti did to me began as humiliation. What I did afterward was not obedience, romance, or gratitude. I set boundaries. Other employees used those protections. Together, they claimed rights that no employer should have possessed the power to grant or withdraw." A reporter asked whether Vincent deserved forgiveness because he had lost his empire. "Loss is not innocence," Naomi replied. "But surrendering control can be the beginning of accountability." The silence that followed was not commanded by armed men, money, or fear. It belonged to Naomi. She asked the press not to publish her mother's medical information, not as a favor to Vincent, but as a test of their own ethics. Several outlets immediately agreed. Others followed when the housekeeper stepped through the doorway carrying a statement approved by the newly elected employee committee. She stood beside Naomi, not behind her, and announced that the trust would pursue every available civil remedy against anyone who endangered an employee's family. Naomi had refused leadership so another woman could discover her own voice. Now that voice carried across the steps. By noon, the intended scandal had changed shape. The wager remained ugly. Vincent's past remained his burden. But Naomi was no longer presented as the mate a powerful man had chosen for a cruel game. She was the woman who had forced power to answer a question, established her terms, and taught others that dignity required agency, not rescue. Vincent watched from the darkened foyer as Naomi returned to the bus stop. He did not send a car. He did not ask her to stay. For the first time, respect meant accepting that her life would continue beyond his reach. The dinner had begun with a man believing he could choose a woman for one evening. It ended with that woman choosing the truth, while he accepted the cost of never owning the meaning of her choice. And that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.